Good morning.
Good morning, Rabbi. Good morning, Chevra.
Morning. What? Oh, give me a second. Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's 3 Prakim Rambam. Actually, today is the final day that all 3 Prakim will be in Hilchos Tumas Meis, as tomorrow we're going to go from Tumas Meis to Hilchos Para Aduma. Today's 3 chapters, Tumas Meis, Prakim, Chaf Aleph, Chaf Beis, and Chaf Gimel. Now, what we learned yesterday in Perek Chaf was the shloisha that are matzilin mi oil hameis, summit puzzle, the din of an oil inside an oil, and the din of beluyin. And this chapter, as well as next chapter, is going to give us many details regarding the summit puzzle that is matzil mi oil hameis, beginning with it's not only that a kleicheres protects anything in it, at least midivrei Torah, as we'll learn later. There are many rabbinic additions to that, but midivrei Torah, anything that's in a ceramic utensil that's tightly sealed is protected. It's not only to a kleicheres, but really we're going to expand that type of protection to other kelim that halachically are not susceptible b'chlal to becoming tamei. They are also going to be matzil and many other details regarding the din of a summit puzzle. Perek Echad ve'Esrim has 11 halachas, and let us begin with halacha Aleph. Says that Rambam minayin l'tzamid puzzle shel matzil b'oil hameis. What's the source? That if you have again the klei cheres that is tightly sealed, that which is in it is not going to become contaminated, even though it's under an oil under which there is a mace. Shenemer, it says in Chukas, chol kli pasuach asher ein samid pasal olav tamehu. So the Torah is therefore implying ha yesh samid pasal olav then tar. Continues that Rambam umipi hashmuel lamdu she'ein hakasav medaber elo b'kli cheres bilvad. Torah is referring to a ceramic utensil. In other words, why is that? How is that hinted in the pasuk? Because that's a keli. That's the only keli she'eino mitame elo derech pischa. It only acquires tuma, right? As we said, from the inner ear space, and that's why it makes sense that im hoya pischa sasu, that if its mouth, if its opening is sealed, tightly closed, meaning umukaf summit pasal. Now, guys, more details of this summit pasal we're going to learn later. Then hitzel al koil shabatoich. And now, so the Torah was referring to a kleicheres. Comes along the chachamim and they make a kal v'chomer. Kal v'chomer l'chol hakelim she'ein mekablim tuma at all. As we learned, there are certain materials that are never going to become tummy. Not only not from the outer part of it, not from the inner part of it. We're speaking about the keli proper. That they for sure, if in them you have food, in them you have other things, and they are tightly sealed, sheyatzilu b'tzamid pasuk. Now, what are the kelim that are made out of what materials, chazardis, that are b'chlal not susceptible to becoming tamei? So a keli that's made out of gulalim, I know for us it sounds strange, but they didn't have the abundance at all the way we have today. And some kelim are made out of dry dung. It's not b'chlal susceptible to becoming tamei. Klei avanim begins like a kleicheres, but a kleicheres is fired in that kiln, in that hot furnace, and that transforms the earth into ceramic. Klei avanim are kelim that didn't undergo this process. Klei avanim are stone kelim. Klei adama are earthen kelim that were not fired up. And as we also learned, we explained that since fish were created from the water, water brings tara. Fish are halachic, water is water. So anything that's made from any part of a fish, right, whether it's the bones of the fish, whether it's the hide of the fish, are not susceptible to tumah. Similarly, bones of birds or a large wooden utensil, habba'a b'mida, that's oversized, that it could contain 40 saw of water or more. It was made to be stationary. It's as if it is stationary. or unasadim shalei shem pshutim venim kelim, flat wood where not flat metal. Flat metal, I'll give you a mashal. A knife is called a flat metal utensil. That is mekabel tuma. Wood, if it has a receptacle, then it could be mekabel tuma. Once it has a receptacle, it's mekabel tuma from either side. But a flat wooden ware is not mekabel tuma. The goal may clay mateches, guys, a goylem, to know what that means. A goylem means an unfinished utensil. Now, there has to be many prati dinim. How do you define finished? But prior to it being halachically finished, even though it's 99% ready, and it has a receptacle, and it's made out of metal, even made out of metal, it's not going to be mekabel tuma. So these are all of the materials or kalim that b'chlal are not mekabel tuma. So they also, the Chachamim made this kal v'chomer called Eila Matzila V'Tzamid Pasol. What's the kal v'chomer? Im ha'devarim shebetoich kli amukav nitzlu. Now, if something that's in this Tzamid Pasol keli is saved, kal v'chomer labeluyim, all right, kalim that are swallowed, kalim that are under an oil, these are the other two of the three, they for sure are going to be protected. Now, ma bein oyholim la kalim shematzilim v'tzamid pasol, it's not the same exact thing. Guys, just quickly review. If the source of tuma is under the smaller oil, we learned yesterday, since soif tuma latzeis, not only does the tuma spread under the little oil, but an oil doesn't protect the outer oil in that direction. But if the tuma is in the larger oil, like in a room, and in there you made a little tent, so we don't say that soif tuma lehi kanes, that which is under the little oil is protected. What's the difference? It's gavaldi. Kalim eina matzilim ela b'tzamid pasol. If you want to use a keli to protect that which is in it, it has to be tightly sealed. The greatness, the power of an oil doesn't have to be sealed at all. Its sides could be open. And normally you say, if there's an opening between one environment and the other, the tumor travels, that's the word of an oil. That an oil protects everything underneath. Halacha beis. Now, mashpech shekofohu. If you have a funnel, now guys, a funnel is made lechatchila, right? The top side is open, right? You're pouring, let's say, wine into a little keli, and in the bottom there's a little opening. Let's make the funnel. If you turn it upside down, so then that little opening is on the top. Matzil b'kisui, afapi sheketzasei nakov nekav katon. We consider that to be a proper close. Because if I have a keli and I want to seal it, I want to close it, and I put this upside down funnel, it's interesting, it's considered closed. If you have a normal seal, a normal cover, I'm going to learn many details about that later, and you make a hole in it, it's going to ruin it. It's not tightly sealed, it's not covered. Interestingly, the funnel lechatchila was made with that hole. When you turn it upside down, it's considered completely closed. You got to remember, we have to remember with God's help all of these details.
What about the size of the hole? We don't mention the size.
No, there's no sides. There's no sides, Kevin. No, it's the wide part is tightly fitting over the keli underneath it. There's only the top opening is not considered an opening. Halacha gimel. Just appreciate these words. Now that we establish it's not only the klei cheres, it's all of the kelim that are not mekabel tuma. If they had that size and they were turned upside down, even though one did not spread clay around the sides to seal it on the ground, then look at this logic. Even though it's not tightly sealed, and we'll see later that part of the tight sealing means with clay. But now that we established that an oil is even a greater protector in this from this angle than a tzamid pasol, because it doesn't need, the sides can be open. So if you turn a keli upside down, if there is in there the tefach by tefach, it's an oil. Nepnei shem ka'oil. Gavaldi. V'oil matzil. Ella imkein hoya hakli kli cheres. If the keli is a kli cheres, that never is matzil as an oil. Why? Because of a rule. She'ein ohale kli cheres matzilin. Kate said, for example, chavis, and just keep it, just to repeat, normally the kelim, the times of Chazal, they were made out of cheres. So a chavis means a ceramic cheres. It's turned upside down. Even if you tightly sealed it into the ground. In other words, you put clay around it. Why? Because the Torah uses the words tzamid pasel olav. Olav means on top and not on the bottom. But you know what's good? Olav does not exclude the sides. If you flip it upside down and it's a cheres keli, it's nish. It's not tzamid pasel, and also there's a klal that cheres cannot function as an oil, but it does not exclude it being sealed from the side. So, for example, you have a keli, and you turned it 90 degrees, not 180 degrees, right? And then you sealed it to the wall. The clear has to be that you not only you stuck it, you smeared it with clay. In other words, the al gabav that we exclude, right? Olav al gabav doesn't exclude the sides, which is great. And also about kol shekeneg the bakois. But if it's not sealed, then ain't a matzelos, because she'ein klei cheres matzal l'shum oil, as we just mentioned. However, what will be even more than a klei cheres? Avol shar kol hakelim. Not only did we already establish an halacha aleph from the Kal V'chomer that they are matzilin when they are tightly sealed, but if shehoyu piyoiseyem the bukas bedofni akoisol, they can be matzil even if they're not smeared with clay. Why? Because they're an oil. Now, guys, I want to give you an example. You see this keli? So this keli, I have coffee in it. I can't turn it to the side. I'm going to lose my coffee. But don't forget, for it to function as an oil when it's to the side, you have to have a tefach by a tefach. It has to have the dimensions of a tefach. And in there, you have to have the roim of a tefach. So lefikach, tzarech sheyeh b'doifen hakeli tefach, because she'ein hakelim matzilim in the fanas oilim, ad sheyeh lohen doifen tefach. Okay. Notice we don't combine them. We want to make sure that the doifen of the keli itself has the dimensions. The hoya leklei doifen chatzi tefach. The hoya yoytzimi doifen oil safa chatzi tefach. So if by the wall, you have on the top of your wall, there's something protruding, going over you. So there is also like a half a tefach of an oil. And now you're turning your cup to the side, and together you have the tefach. Like the Rambam just said, we need for the tefach to be from the keli itself, or to say that it has to be from one entity and not a combination of two entities. Halacha dal. Similarly, says the Rambam, we're speaking about a keli that's turned 90 degrees, and in it, it becomes an oil. Kach matzilin chutz la'oil. Im samchel oil, they also protect outside, as the Rambam will explain in a moment, because the oil is an oil no matter where you place it. For example, clay mecham, right? A kettle, sheyesh loy doifen tefach, which is needed because you have to can make a oil from two different materials. And the sheinichai al gaba yiseidos chutz la'oil. So, guys, if whoever is looking at the chayenu, so the A is inside a room or inside a tent. You have B is very skinny. The painting the dimensions are a little weird, but you have to picture B as being a normal kettle, a keli, a pot, and you turned it, like we said, 90 degrees. All right? He made B very wide because you need to have the tefach. The samach b'vadayfen oil, and there was some source of tuma underneath it. So kelim shebatoicha yatohinu. That's the pshat, that the oil is matzah. Now, guys, we already said if this would have been inside the room, same thing. Doesn't matter where you place it. But if this would have been near a wall, not of an oil, ein amatzel, why? Ein koisel oil. Because we don't allow for the koisel to be an oil, or because it's not a wall of an oil. And if that will be the case, lefikach kelim shebetoich hakeli will be tameim. Now the question is, why would it be tameim? Why do I need to have the din of an oil? So guys, forget about an oil. You have to remember, go back to Pedicute base. If you have an item inside a keli that's over tuma, we learned that even though kalim and adam, they bring tuma to what is underneath it, it doesn't stop the tuma from going through it. Sharei he'elu al hatuma, the Rambam just takes it for a given. Kalim are not chaytzitz. The chiddush here is that if this is connected to an oil, then we give that keli a din of an oil. Once you are activating din oil, look how lenient we are. Look how powerful oil is to protect from tumah. Stam lahoyer, now that the last moment of Golos, that we go a lot to the oils, look how the koyach of the oil. In other words, we don't care if there's openings from the sides, the tumah doesn't go, the tumah doesn't penetrate. It's crazy. Kalim are not chaytzitz, but the moment the keli is connected to an oil, even outside the oil, dinoi ka oil. You have a beam, right? The beam has the width. And it can happen a lot. I know here in LA you have many such houses. That means you have, if you look up when you're inside the room, they do it for design. You see beautiful wooden beams going from side to side. Obviously, we're speaking about such beams that have the width of a tefach, and the tumah is right underneath it. Or if you have a kedera means a pot, guys. It's earthenware. So remember, it's hanging down from the ceiling. But this beam is tightly on top of this kedera. It's covering it. We say that the kalim that are inside the spot are tohoidim. Why? Amazing. So before we learned the importance of having something tightly sealed on top of the keli, what we're learning right now is that if the oil itself is right on top of the keli, it protects everything in it. But if there was a little bit of space in between the beam and the keli underneath it, and this kedera underneath it, then we say kol mashu b'kedera tamei, and the kedera itself is tamei, because air went in it, the tumah went in it, it becomes tamei. Everything in it becomes tamei. Halacha vav. Now here, whoever has a chayenu, he wrote a very good note in 4, just a halt cup between the din of a boil and the din of a chadus. So I'm going to read it even for those who don't have it. He writes like this: boil and chadus are both holes in the ground that people used to use to store water. The difference between them is the boil, just to know, is a pit that's in the ground, and the chadus is some sort of storage area that's built on the ground but above the ground. Okay, let's go into Vav. And there's tum in the bayis, and you have kalim in the boil. If this cistern is covered with a flat board, or if it's covered with keli hamatzil. Guys, what's a keli hamatzil? Keli hamatzil are the kalim that never can become tamei, as we just mentioned before. Sheyesh loy doifen tefach. So now that we said that an oil on top of something doesn't even have to be tightly sealed, so then harei kol mashu b'boyd is time. If there was a certain border built around this halt cup, this boyd, and that is gavoya ala aretz, tefach ala aretz. So now we say bein shekiso bekeli amatzil sheish loy doifen bein shloi shloi doifen aleza masel sheish loy doifen tefach mimarkem achar, which is quite amazing. So you already have the tefach. You already have the tefach. All you need is to cover it. In other words, you don't have to have the keli itself should have the tefach in it for the tefach to be activated as an oil. All of this is for it not to have to be tightly sealed. Halacha 7. Now the chadus, as we said. So now you have, again, it's a building on the ground. It's made for storage. People can even store liquids in there. Habanu in the house. Point is that there is an oil. The roof of the house is over it. And now, guys, he didn't make a picture, but it's you will hulk up over here. Umenoida betoichai. Menoida means that there is something in there that's going all the way to the top of it. Now, if you can think about your mother's candlestick, but think about a candlestick, but the area where you put the candle, which he's calling a flower, is definitely bigger. In other words, because you put a lamp on it or you put wax on it. So the top, it can be a skinny stick, but the top part is a nice flat area. The cover of this chadus, it goes and it covers the nos and kli hamatzal. Now, covering doesn't mean it covers the whole chadus. It just means that it takes up the mouth, the opening. The nos and kli hamatzal ba'oil hameis al pi chadus, and you put a keli with the dimensions that we mentioned. I think it was an halacha gimel, right? A keli that when you turn it to the side, that keli itself can be an oil. It's already an oil in it. But it's not resting on the walls of the chadus, which would be great. It's resting on top of this flower. It's resting on top of the place where you put the candle. So now we have to see the following. If the menorah would have been removed, if this keli that you are using to cover the chadus, and it's going to serve as an oil, even though if you would remove the menorah, it would go down a little bit, but it would end up resting on the walls of the chadus. It would be oimed. So then we say, oh, it's on top of the chadus. Even though it's higher than it. And the kelim shebein sfas hakeli usfas hachadus, and even if you manage in the height, right, the chadus goes up a foot. The cover is a foot and an inch above the ground, again, because the center of the menorah is keeping it up. If you would take it away, it would not fall all the way in it because it's wide enough. It would be held up. So if you put the kelim in that inch, are tohoidim. You see that? Even though the sides are open to the room, because we're using the keli to be matzal as an oil. If you're standing in the room, you can see the top part of the menorah. Again, because the menorah is going higher than the walls of the chadus. Doesn't matter, but it's covered with a keli that is functioning as an oil. Just to say that until now, very good. That will be a boir. The chadus, until halacha ches, we were speaking primarily where the tumah was in the bayis, and the bayis has a ceiling, and therefore everything else in the house should become contaminated unless it's protected. Now we're going to learn about the case if the tumah is in the chadus, as we'll see. So chadus b'notei bayis, and again there's a keli that can serve as an oil, because the inside of the keli, Danny, has a height of a tefach when you turn 90 degrees. Okay? And we said it's even better than a tzamid pasel. And Narvas then, the tumah was in there. Bein tzfas hakli, tzfas hachadus, or b'toich hachadus. There was tumah in the chadus. Whether it was inside of it, whether, as we mentioned, there was a menorah that was sticking a bit higher than the walls of the chadus. And the keli was halachically making it into an oil. Now, guys, as we are explaining, first of all, we learned yesterday that the tzamid pasel is only matzal in one direction. And I know now we're learning that oil is even greater than a tzamid pasel. Doesn't matter, but it only protects from the outer to the inner because of the rule that we don't say soif tuma likanes. But if the tuma is in it, okay, so it's an oil. Push it. If you were to build a little oil in this room right now, in your room, and there would be a source of tuma under your little oil, the whole house will become tummy because soif tuma lotzes. Habayis tummy. She'eno oil she'botei habayis mani atuma k'may shebiyanu. Soif tuma lotzes. Now, hoisa tuma habayis. Now let me add a word yachap. And there is no cover on the chadus. Must be that way. See the Rambam Again, if there's a cover on the chadus, that's what we spoke about before in halacha zayin, and there's no kisui. So vazagimid kelim shebekostlei hachadus. Here we have the walls of the chadus are so thick that and they're hollowed that you put kelim inside those walls. Im yesh v'mekoymem tefach al tefach v'al rum tefach. Now let me add another detail. You have to help up. And the top opening is not wide a tefach. Because whenever you have two environments, Danny, and there's an opening of a tefach between them, the tumah passes through. So the area in there is like a separate area. Even though there's no kisui, if the top is not a tefach by a tefach, then the tumah cannot get in there. Tohidim. But the imlav tameim. Gavaldik concepts. If now, I know that we said before, we read the footnote 4, that the chadus is normally built in the house. Now we're going to have some sort of hole in the ground. And the hole, Danny, goes beyond the limits of the house. The hole goes, now there are coverings, people are not going to fall in the hole, but just to know the structure of the hole goes outside of the house as well. That's the case over here. Whether you have a Pesach tefach or not, the dinners are going to be tohidim. Whatever is inside those walls are tohidim. They are considered outside the house. We already explained that was a crazy halacha. Now this detail, tanur chodesh doesn't have a din of a keli. A tanur that was even only used once, it's called an old tanur that has a din of a keli. And what's the din of a keli? On one hand, think about an oven, and there's a kazayis v'names in the oven, and there's a keli in the oven. So the oven itself is oil enough to bring the tumah underneath it. L'chumra. A keli, anything that has a din of a keli, even a tanur. If you remember, we learned, I think it was yesterday, that for some halachas, we don't consider a tanur a bona fide keli. But here, a tanur, a keli, is not choitzes. Okay. Shem b'vim esatuma. The einam nasam oiholim. Why cannot that not be an oil? And not be an oil means, we just said that a klei cheres, guys, that's a rule. Cheres never functions as an oil. The oil lekula, to be matzah. That means an oil, b'toich oil. Oh. So now, but don't forget that even though we said that a klecheres doesn't function as an oil, now let's go back to the first topic of this chapter. There's a din of tzamid pasel. So if I have the ovens were made out of a ceramic, it's all ceramic. If I have a ceramic oven in my house, even though the din will be that if there's tum in the house, everything in the tanur will be tummy. It's an oil in the oil. No, cheres does not serve as an oil. Tumah goes in it. But if I'm going to tightly seal the opening to this tanur, then it's going to be like a klei cheres, like a tzamid pasel. Elam kein ribuk of tzamid pasel, kishar kelam amatzilim, which is great. So there could be a way that a tanur will protect everything in it. Now, the kvar biyanu, that if the tanur was never used, einam kekelim liyan said, it does function also as an oil, which is really great. Only without a tzamid pasel, like any other oil. Okay, now that we gave that intro, now I want you to know that there are many ways when you think about an oven. I know Tzamach is thinking about an oven with the opening to the side, because Mustafa, that's the way most ovens we know today. The oven in my kitchen opens from the side, the big brick ovens for pizza from the side. The oven that we're talking about here has an opening in the top. First, remember that. And the classical kisui that they would use in the times of Chazal, we will refer to that type of cover as a sereida. No one's they would put the pita breads on the wall. They would open up the sereida. It's not sealed. Open up the cover like a pot, and they would put stuff in there or put stuff on the ground of it, and then they would cover it for all the heat to be maintained. Now, and that the intro was very important. Now, halacha 9. Tanur yashan b'toich hachadash. Tanur yashan b'toich hachadash. Guys, the chadash, just with a sereida, dinoi ka'oil. Tumah doesn't get in there. Now, where is the sereida? So usreid al pi hachodosh. So the problem here, Danny, is that the Tanur Yashan is not covered, but the outer one is covered. Here's the word. It's the cover, the walls of the Yashan, Danny. They go higher. Everything is facing up. They go higher than the walls of the outer one. So yeah, they're protruding. So therefore, the cover, that's the word. The cover is not directly on the Chadash, which would have been great. So now, Ryan, same thing we learned before by the Chadus. If they would remove the older Tanur. So it's about not height, it's about width. The cover is wide enough that even though it would go down, right? Because if the inner one, Danny, is going higher up, if you take it out, the cover would go down. But if the walls of the Chadash are not that wide, the cover would not fall through it. It would hold it up, like we learned before. If the walls were not wide, they were way too wide. They were way too wide, so we would not keep it up. Then so the bottom line will be is that I know that a tanur chadash, Danny, is an oil. It has to be covered. Then there's no cover. If there's no cover, so then the tumah goes in it, and everything in it becomes tummy. And even point is tanur chadash is matzah. How is it matzah midin oil? And the beauty of an oil is if you just have a cover on it, and we're gonna learn more details today. Summit Puzzle is not just covering it; it has to be tightly sealed. Now, guys, flip the scenario. So the yashin is the outer one that doesn't have the power to function as an oil. And here, normal, the outer one was bigger, the outer one was taller. The siridas on top of the yashin. Now, im yesh bein hachodosh v'hakisui pachus mitefach. Here's the word down. Can we use the cover that's on the yashan? Can we consider that to be covering the one in it? So if they are close to each other, that means the cover is less than a tefach from the top of which is good. Then the chadash is considered covered. And therefore the chadash that stirs as an oil saves everything in it. But if not, no, then yeah, the chadash is gewaldik, but the chadash is inside the yashin. The kisui is only the kisui of the yashin. The tumah goes into the yashin because the yashin doesn't serve as an oil. Once the tumah gets into the yashin, if the chadash doesn't have a cover, how can it serve as an oil? Halacha yud. Today, the sholcheres, if the covering is made out of earth and it has a rim, has a border means that it doesn't cover bidiyuk, the opening of the keli, but it's very big. It goes beyond the keli itself. And another detail, umukefes summit pasel was properly, it was sealed. They sealed it on the oven. Even if there's tuma underneath the outer protruding part, right, or on top of the outer protruding part, then everything becomes tamei. What's right? Everything, Danny. Everything else, kleicheres, maybe esatuma ve'ena matzel. Think about it. So if I have something under here, source of tuma under here, if the pot is very big, everything underneath it becomes tummy. Really, it doesn't stop the tumor from going into the bias. The bias becomes tummy. Everything else in the house becomes tummy. The only thing that remains tarred is the area in it. Now, let me go further. If it's a tanur yashan, okay, good. Everything in the house becomes tamei. I will connect the aviroi shel tanur. Interestingly, connect the aviroi shel tanur in the house. That will remain tahor. Why is that, Danny? Because here we have a tzamid pasel. So it does protect that which is in the tanur and everything which is above it. Hoisa tuma keneged avinoi shel tanur. If the tuma is placed over the cover, but not over the edges that are protruding outwards, and then you are ruling that cover to be a classical cheres, which may be the inochaitzes. But if it's on top of the tanur, on top of the area that's summit puzzle, so the tuma doesn't go down, the tuma goes up. Amazing. In other words, the part that's going out, dinoi kecheres. It's not an oil, it's a keli. The part that's over the oven, since it's sealed, that's a whole different din. And at summit puzzle, let's start. Halacha yudala, final halacha. Kedeira shekafal piachavis. So you have an earthenware pot. Everything is earth, guys. And you turned it around and you covered a smaller keli. In other words, you're using the kedeira to be a cover for the chavis. And you did it summit puzzle. We're saying that because that's why I said the kedeira has to be earthenware. And earthenware doesn't function as it's not chaytzitz, it doesn't function as an oil. We're speaking about the din of a summit puzzle. And you smeared it with clay. Matzelas al koil mashe betoicha. And not only that, al mashe beino bein sfasas achavius. That means if there's any area between the inner keli that you are covering and the outer keli that you're using as a cover, even tuma that's in there, it's all considered to be inside the tzamid puzzle, and it's not tummy. But what happens, guys, if I have the bottom chavis and I have a kedeira, and guys, I'm putting the kedeira right side up. I'm putting the kedeira right side up, the hairs. And even though umeirach, I connected it with clay, is it considered a cover? No, it's when I turn it upside down, of course it's considered a cover. That's the whole word. And even if it goes beyond, but if it's facing up, eino matzelas. And what's the logic of that? Because since it's facing up, that means if there's tuma in the bias, the tuma goes into the top kedeira. Once something itself becomes tamei, even if it's sealed on top of something else, it doesn't save it. Today's second chapter is Perek Chav Beis. This is going to be the final chapter that's going to give us even more pratim concerning the din of a tzamid puzzle, that is matzel a klei cheres. We're going to learn about the klei cheres. Does the klei cheres, my friends, lose its status as a keli? Now, what's amazing, B'chlal, we mentioned this yesterday, that there are so many dinim that we are learning in Tahara that do not follow the same rules as we have in many other areas of Allah. Like B'chlal, we mentioned, this whole Pesach Tefach goes against Lavud. And it's amazing. You should know that Lavud is applicable to everything not to hear. I'll give you another rule. Guys, we learned this together. If you have a keli, let's say B'chlal, the dinim of Tuman Tara. A keli, for a keli to become Tameh, it has to be a keli. What happens if the keli gets broken? So we say, there is a point where it no longer is considered a keli. How much of a crack or a breakage in a keli do you need for a keli to lose tummy? Remember that, guys? So you have rules of moitzi dimoin and moitzi zayis and moitzi mashke and machnes mashke. There's many series of halachas. Here we're speaking about a whole different din. When does the klei cheres lose its status of a klei cheres for it not to be protected with summit puzzle? We're also going to have the words of Moitzi Zayis, but there's going to be different rules. We're going to learn about the rules of when the klei cheres loses its status of a klei cheres for it to be nitzoel midin summit puzzle. Many shiurim will be the same shiurim that we use by Hilchos Tumah V'Tana, but we won't apply them the same way. It's like a whole new seder of halachas. Perek Chav Beis has, again, 11 halachas, and let us begin with halacha aleph. Shulei hamachatzim. So many different ways of understanding it. I know he writes in the bottom, for whoever's using a chayenu, that certain kalim have handles, and the handles themselves are receptacles, and they're very large. Receptacles doesn't have to mean that they go in a mile deep, Danny. Receptacle simply means You think about a handle that it's flat. If a handle is curved like a bowl and they're very big, a person who would need to store something can use the handle itself as a keli. Shule karkois hakelim. We're not going to use the word zveha. Sometimes a keli is made in a way, again, there's different ways of understanding it. He writes here in the English nice that there are certain bulges in the bottom of a keli. It's as if it's like a cheder sheni on your keli. It was not made for that to be used as a keli for itself, but it's possible to use that as a keli b'fnei atzmai. Or the daf leisayim ha'achireim. Let's learn pshat daf leisayim ha'achireim. And there's a big machlekes how to learn every line over here. Do you know that certain kelim, some of your fancy ceramic teacups, that if you turn it upside down, what happens is that when you turn it upside down, there's right there a little keli there. Well, it's many kelim, like my keli here, that's flat. If you turn it upside down, you can't use it for liquid. Certain kelim are fancier, and the bottom, if you invert it, is like a shtickle receptacle, a concave, and there's a machlekes. The concept we all get. In other words, you have a large earthenware keli. Parts of it themselves have a receptacle, and they could be used as a keli. Now, if someone were to put liquid in it, and they would tightly seal it, and yes, I know, my friends, we didn't yet define what does it mean tightly. We're going to get to that, but we learned in the last chapter. You cover it with something and you put clay around it. You would say tzamid pasel. We don't say that. It doesn't have a din of the klei cheres lekula that it became protected through the tightly sealing. You know why? Because that was not made for a keli. So what if it's tightly sealed? Like, let me think about it, b'chal, guys. Let's say you have a keli, you have a bed, and you put a sheet over it. That's a bad example. That's an oil. You put something that can serve as that ain't oidinaka oil. You put some sort of ceramic covering over it. It's not matzah anything. Klei cheres doesn't function as an oil. And the item is not in a klei cheres, or even better, like we learned in the beginning of the last chapter, in a keli that's not makabel tumah to become mitzoil, because it's in a keli that's tightly sealed or covered. It's not in a keli. If it was not made for a keli, whatever's in there is not in a keli. However, what did people do then? They didn't have the abundance that we have today. Many times, when you had a keli, let's say that I'm going to give a handle. You had a handle. The handle was so big that it served as a keli. You know what people would do? They would say, this is great. Now I have myself 2 kelim. But they would remove the handle and they would finish it. However they finished kelim, they would smear it with something. They would glaze it with something. That's something else. That if kirsaman, this shafan, basam kelim, if you cut them off and you plane them, or you did whatever you did to make a gemar keli, now you created a new keli. Matzil Matzal Puzzle. Point is, she'ain matzil with some puzzle, only a keli. And yeah, we don't limit it to a klei cheres, as we learned in the previous chapter, but it has to be a keli. Halacha beis. Klei cheres shenosan by tit al chetzioy. What happens if you filled it up with tit? You filled it up, it's filled with tit. And I put something inside that clay. Loy bitla. It's on one hand, it's not the ois keli, which is great, because we just said if something is not considered a keli, even if it's tightly sealed, it's not going to become nitzah. Another din. Okay, so if a keli is sunk into the clay, let me add, and the container is sealed, since he's filling it up with clay up until half, and if it was filled more than half, you will mevatel the keli. If it's only half or less, then whatever is in there won't be matzah. The matzah will mean, guys, obviously.
That's it is sunken into the tit.
Yeah, we don't need that because it's matzah. Doesn't matter which way. Matzah, if it's tightly sealed. There's a lot that you have to chap. Halachigim. Klei cheres matzah b'tzamid pasel. Now, like we mentioned in the intro. Now, guys, I don't know the definition of a klei cotton and a klei gadol. Okay, if it's a klei cotton, moitzirimoin. If it's a klei gadol, it only becomes ois keli in Yiddish, not keli. If most of it was damaged, like we had before, was tit in half. If it's only half damaged, I'm telling you, in Hilchos Tumah V'Tara, We don't say that only if the majority of the keli is damaged does it become not keli. It's susceptible to becoming tummy. It's a whole different series of the din that a keli has to be is matzel with summit puzzle has to be a keli. For that, it doesn't lose its status. For example, clay gadol, however it's defined big, shenivchas chetziyoy, it has to be chetziyoy. Okay, not rubai. In other words, it's not batal mitoidas keli and the hikif summit puzzle, and now you surround it with the summit puzzle. There's also marking up chas with summit puzzle. Now, guys, make no mistake. You can't say that if it was damaged, Yaakov, and there's openings on the side, even though it doesn't amount to roiv, but when you seal the top, you have to seal the side. It's not a seal that fixes the keli. It has to be sealed, but the point is it's a keli that's sealed. Harei ze matzah. The Rambam writes explicitly, the kidding for Hilchas Tumah V'Tara, guys, and I know that we use the words Moitzidim and by Tumah and Tara. We're going to get to Hilchas Kelim, don't worry. But there's many Kelim that they're much less than that is a Mabatal, much less than that. Not over here. Here, there's two shiurim, clay gadol, clay cotton. If someone knows, they can let me know how you define it. Clay gadol, rubai, clay cotton, but Moitzidim. This is big or small. The Rambam wants to make it clear that if there is a crack or an opening in the side, even though it's not mevatel or played a scale, the tumah goes into it. So we don't say, like we said, from a room to a room that you need a paseach tefach. No, even a little opening. Because it's not a sealed keli. Now, okay, what is the shear of the hole? Now listen to this. Then, if it has a size of a zayis or more, that's not sealed. Tumah goes into it. Less than a zayis, you're good. But if it was made for liquid, which is similar to the logic by Hilchas Kelim, liquids, even a smaller hole, ruins the usage. Now, let me just remind people by Hilchas Kelim, we're going to learn something that's called moitzi mashke, koines mashke. Remember the difference? I'll tell you like this, my friends. If you have the smallest hole in a keli, if there's area for oxygen to enter from the top, water is going to seep out. Koines mashke is a hole that's larger than moitzi mashke. You can have a hole that allows liquid to ooze out, but let me do the opposite. If I have a keli that's empty and I have a big bowl of water and I put the empty keli in it, will the liquid go into it? That's called koines mashke. A hole that's moitzi mashke, lav dafka will be koines mashke. Here you have to have the koines mashke. Mashke shira koines mashke. And again, if it's koines mashke and it's not sealed, then it's not going to be protected. Liquid and solids, we're going to be machmir. Meaning that if there is a hole that allows liquid to go into it, and you did not seal the hole, even though you sealed the top, ain't a matzil. Either make to be soisim the nekef, or at least make it smaller.
Who cares what size hole?
Then we don't care. But let me go back to the beginning. If I have a keli gadol and most of it is missing, most of it got broken, even if I seal using, let's say, wax, it's not a keli. And since it's not a keli,
It's not a keli either way.
no, it's not true. So first of all, one second. Again, guys, not a keli, whenever, I know for me, not a keli normally is susceptible to becoming tumah. That's not what we're talking about. The Rambam begins this pedic by saying that there's a big leniency. That's clay cheres, right? Is matzel, whatever is in it, if it's sealed. Says the Rambam, even if it's sealed, if there's a certain diminution of the sides or the bottom, even though if it's called a keli, if it's bechlal not a keli, if it's not called a keli anymore, even if it's sealed, it's garnished. If it's a keli, has to be closed. That's what we're talking about. 2 steps. Halacha dal. Now, guys, whoever learned the last chapter, the Rambam just used the word Sereida is used by Chazal for the normal coverings that they had for Tanurim, for ovens. So Shoy Sereida al Piv Umukev Tzamid Pasol. Make no mistake, guys, we need to have Mukev Tzamid Pasol because of the dinim that we learned in the previous chapters. In other words, Kalim can serve sometimes, at least partially, as an oil, not by a tanur, and not a serida. In other words, the a cheres material is b'chlal not an oil. Okay, so the only way that this serida will function as a protector for that which is in the tanur is if it's tightly sealed. So omuk of tzamid pasel, and now this tanur that's properly covered and has a dinoi tzamid pasel, but oil hameis, which is great, right? And however, the oven is cracked. Now, before we spoke about kalim, clay gadol, clay cotton, yeah? Moitzirimoin, ruboy. What about a tanur? Tanur has different rules. It's not about things seeping out. You don't fill it up, you put bread in it. So here the rule is like this. If the crack is as wide as the width of a plow, which was a standard size, now we did have a few days ago, the mardeya being a tefach or being less than a tefach, so it was more or less the tefach area. Shu ekef tefach. Tefach means not, we learned a few days ago, the two sizes. Hekef tefach means that the diameter is a third of a tefach. It's 1.3 then, better. Nevertheless, that size nitmatanor. Look at the details. Even if it's exactly that size, guys, when you have an opening exactly the size of the circumference of a mardeya, right? For me to be able to insert the zacher in the nekeva has to be bigger. You understand? But even if it doesn't fit in, it's not good. And therefore, the tanur is not summit puzzle. And the kisui made out of cheres oil, he says, it's not matzal me oil. You appreciate this. But if the opening is on the side, only the equal amount takes away its status, and Tuma goes into it. If the cover is the one that gets cracked, for you to lose the status of the cover, it has to be a bigger crack. It has to be enough for a pi mardeya to be able to enter. No, it has to be larger than the mardeya. Only then is it tummy. It's a little bit bigger. Now, Hoya has said that ogoil, the pi mardeya was whatever size it is, it has to fit in. We don't say what is the sum total of the square inches. We don't do that. If you can put in a pi mardeya, then the cover is not a cover. If you can't put it in, even though it's the equal size, and by the walls, equal size is problematic here, it's not. Right, halacha. All of this is played as Moshe. Tanur hamukav tzamid pasel. Shenikav negev be'eno shel tanur atucha. There is a hole on its top. And many tanurim had holes on its top. Why? Because when you have stuff cooking in the tanur, at times you would want to insert wood. Sometimes you have to know how things work. Oxygen entering is good. So they would make these little holes on top of the tanur, functional holes. So now, if you have a reed, and when you light the reed a fire, let's say you look into the hole and you want to add fire in there. So they would light a reed and they would stick it through the hole without needing to open it. We all know now, even when you open your oven in the middle of cooking, guys, you can ruin everything. So there's not only big enough for you to fit the reed, Danny, it's that the reed that's a flame won't be extinguished when you stick it through there, because if it's just tightly fitting, so if you can do it and still the kush remains a flame, that hole takes away the summit puzzle that is an itma. It's very logical. It's when you have a normal cover, you didn't plan to make a hole in it. A hole will invalidate it only if it's big enough, right, for the plima there to fit through it. If you made a hole for a purpose, for you to be able to bring things in it, whether it is to bring more wood in it, whether it is to have air going in there, that hole is more chashuv. So it has to be very, very small for it not to lose, for it not to ruin the tzamid pasal. We got to get moving. Even when it's not a flame, just like we had before in halacha dalid, that a crack in the side, even smaller relative to those shiurim, invalidates here also. If you have a clay seal of a jug, which is great, so it's a tzamid pasal. The jug is also made out of cheres, that it has a hole. So what do we say? So there's different grains, right? You have rye grains. If you were to look at a stalk of rye, you're going to notice that where the grains come out of, right? They have this in Mishnayos. You have three nuts. A nut is basically the place from where you have outgrowths. And the way Hashem made it, B'tava is the lowest nut. It's called the third nut, is the thickest. The middle nut is Beinani, and the top one is very little. So the size of the Shniya. Now, if you have large casks that get perforated, so one would argue that if the keli is very large, you have to have a proportional large hole. We don't say that. The Zelbashir, Shayurim Kadesh Tikones, Mitzvah Shneil Shol. I'm sorry, I take it back. Yes, Sholkana. Yeah. You have to have a larger hole to invalidate it. When the chavis or the chatzov, right, the jug or the cask were made for wine. Even the smallest hole is nitma'u. Furthermore, even bisman shenasu liyayin, where we allow a larger hole relative, this I understand. Now I don't understand the difference between wine and other mashkin, but it fits with many halachas. It means if something happened by itself, it's less problematic. Just like we had before in halacha hey, right? When you make a hole on top of a tanur to put things in there, that hole is more chashuv. And in this context, it ruins it's being sealed. Afilu kol shein tameim. Even the small, if you made it for a reason. Even wine, right? But what do people say today? That air is good. Let the wine breathe. So if you make a hole, you made the hole. It's not considered a. Before we spoke about a keli. By a keli, it's bekoinus mashka. Here we're not speaking about a bowl or a plate. Here we're speaking about a jug. Okay. No, it's still a trade. If you seal the hole, you're good. Halacha zay.
Sorry.
You have to, yes. If you made the hole, you always have to seal it. If you didn't make the hole, then the shiurim we had above. Chavish is made out of ceramic, cheres. And now, what did we mention before? Holes are problematic. A man-made hole is problematic. You have a man-made hole, but you have a straw going through it. Now, guys, when Tuma's going to be bias, labias, that was last week. Pseach tefach. Here we're saying no. Here we're saying this cheres is under the oil, right? A cheres is not matzal midin oil. Cheres is only matzal midin samid pasul. A little hole invalidates it. So now a little hole is problematic, but you had in the hole a cheres straw. Alskov Yaakov. No, me, I don't know the detail. Remember as kids, we had those funny straws that they dreizach. That's the straw we're talking about. We learned just somewhere in Talmud, in Gemara, quoting this Draisa. Because if it would be a straight straw, that's a nekev. And it was a nekev made for you to take liquid out. The vart is that since it's a straw that's on a curve, so this straw that's inserted in the hole, from the perspective of the contents in the jug, it's not perforated. It's not straight. Now again, if the chavis itself is not samid pasul, is if it's only covered but not sealed, there's rechet garnish vert. Everything goes in it. But the chavis will care for samid pasul. Now, look at this guy. This is amazing halachas now. The chavis itself and the mashkin in it are tohoiden, farvas, because it's from the perspective of inside the barrel, it's sealed. The straw, because the straw is not straight. But if you are inside for the straw, no. In other words, it's not inside it. There's part of the straw that's sticking out. Now, the Rambam, this line, the word akuma Yaakov was used to explain why the chavis is protected. But that akuma only says that if you're inside the chavis, there's no direct exit. It's considered as if it's sealed. But the ein ha'akam kisasum for the straw itself. What I don't remember. my question is, it has to, okay, fine. If the straw is tummy, just a halt cup over here. So the straw becomes choira. Okay, choira, the mashkin, is also problematic. I know not tumas meis. Maybe what I'm saying is wrong. They're nitzel from tumas meis. But the chavi is, we're saying that the straw is a keli. The straw becomes tummy. Tumas shiva. It's an av. Now it's touching liquid. The liquid becomes addition. If I'm saying wrong, I stand corrected. Now I want you to know that at least if it would be water, the water would be okay. Because water is the only liquid that could go, you can take it to a mikvah by doing hashaka. We'll learn about that later. Maybe it means even the context anatomy. I don't think it can mean that. The straw will be matami, but it's not tame from tumas meis. And we said a hole is a problem. Chavis, aber, the sasmu shemarim as a nekev. Gavaldik. You know what the din is? Yes, hitzil. Ogav chatzi nekev. If the owner plugged half of the hole, and now the shemarim sealed half of the hole, here there's already a problem because we can argue, Yaakov, that once you are making an effort to seal it, maybe now we can no longer use the shemarim. The shemarim is not as chashed; it happens by itself. Now, if you close it with a twig is not straight. That means when you stick a twig into something, basically this twig is wavy. So then, you have to smear it with clay around the sides. And if you use 2 twigs, shnei kesamim, then you have to put that clay not only on the outer parts of the hole, but also in between one and the other. If you put a board on top of a tanur, we want for that board to function as a what? As a tzomit pasel made. If you smeared it with clay, that's pshat hitzim. But if you put 2 boards, same concept, it's not enough for you to put clay. By the edges of the boards, you have to put clay also in between the boards. But if you connect these 2 boards with nails, either nails of wood, or you use some sort of cork material to seal these 2 boards together, now you only need to have clay in the outer part. And it's now let's go by to, finally, this is the final. The next Pedic is a whole new big Pedic, big din. What's called sealing? What materials are considered chashuv enough for you to say it's sealed? A whole series. Let's go. I'm going to read it straight into English. Either lime or clay or gypsum or pitch or wax or mud or even filth or mortar or b'chol davar hamis ma reyach. Right? We had that word in Hilchos Shabbos. Anything that could be smeared.
Is Danny not there today? It's gypsum.
Yeah, Danny is an Atzilus. He's here, but he's not here. He's half here.
Gypsum.
Hello, Danny. Wake up. However, what not? We do not seal, not with ba'ats, not with tin. Now, why would you think tin? Because tin is a very, very thin metal, so you can bend it. You can manipulate it. Like a tin foil, good example. That's not good.
Wax and mud also.
No, wax is considered more gooey. Or lead. Why? Because even though it's taka a seal, but it's not called tight. Guys, the word samid means tight. Pasil means seal. Seal it is. Very good. I like the tin foil. Maybe tin foil is skinnier than tin. I don't know. But it's not called tight. Like, what about fruits? Take a fig. Now, God, we're speaking not about a oizgevepte fig. We're speaking about a nice, plump, juicy fig. It's like a wax. You know when you can use it only if it was not susceptible. The moment something itself becomes susceptible, very good. Or you can use dough. Dough is also good, but only if the dough. Now, how can you have dough, guys? Dough? No, because you can make flour and make paytas. You don't have to put any water. Make paytas is not action. Or not even make paytas for your time. In other words, the moment it's itself is susceptible to tumah, you're putting it in the oil amaze. If it becomes tamei, it cannot be the sealant. Halacha test. If you have a covering of a jug and you tightly sealed it, but now it became loose. Sometimes you say once it was already good, like once you have a keli, now there's a little hole. It's still good. No, not over here. It's not loose enough for you to slip it off, but no, no, let me go back to the word tzamid. Tight. The tzamid aspect is nishgot. If you have a rubber ball, or strands of rubber that are tied together, that are rolled together. We're speaking about types of balls that are filled with little crevices and openings. So you know what you have to do? It's not enough for you to seal the outer part of this ball to the opening of the keli. You have to smear that whole ball with this wax. It itself has to be completely sealed off. Right? Not good enough. Matla means all of it. And now, the chain, the matle shelbeged, same thing. You can use shmata, you can use material. Now, guys, maybe technology today allows us to have things that are so much more finer. Kenzyme, I'm speaking about a normal, think about the old patch. When you have a patch, I know the shmata business, in between every thread, there's a little opening. So the word of sealed means that if you want to use old, used shmatas as a seal, first you have to smear it with one of the items we mentioned before to completely close that and then seal it to the side. You have to completely close that up. But you know what? Paper is much better. Paper is completely closed. Or if you have leather, now that Rambam is adding a detail, these are materials that you don't have to use. Like we said, all of these gooey materials, here a rope is good. No, I'm sorry, not good. Rope is also not good. Only im meirach menatzadodim kitzil. But you know what you don't have to do to the paper, Danny? You don't have to smear the whole paper with wax. No, it's beged, woven material, even though it's tightly woven, it's considered there's holes, there's space in between the threads. So you have to first upgrade the material and then tightly seal it with clay. Oil and niyar are good enough. Halacha ches, let's go. Chema shel oil dagav. If you have a bag, a container made out of oil hadag, oil haniyar. In other words, you have a big piece of paper, we're speaking about items that are not susceptible to tumah, and you put in it a klei cheres. So guys, here's my mashal. So if this were to fit in it, so there's a big difference between if I'm closing it in the top, that's worse because how tight, or if I put it lachatchila upside down. And here they come together under the keli. Oh, so that's the one. If it's tzrara milamata, in other words, you put together the outer parts of the dog or of the niyar under the keli. Harezu matzelas. Ve'im loy tzrara. But if it was not tight, I did the normal smearing over here. So what? It comes off so easy. Halacha final halacha yud aleph chavyis zefufa, a jug that's completely covered with pitch, which means you have yourself a great summit puzzle, but aber shenikla v'cheres mil maila. But some of the clay of the jug was peeled off. Some of the clay is peeled off, and what happens? Bahazefes shala oimeid. But because of the fact that you covered it with pitch, the pitch is keeping the keli into a keli. But some of the cheres went missing. The nasoin hakisui al hazefes. You know, guys, I don't know why they would put. Let's say they put zefes in it. You have a clay cheres, you smeared it inside with zefes in, and some of the cheres on the outer part got peeled off. But the zefes is still strong enough, and when you put the cover is not on the cheres, the cover is on the zefes. That's this halacha. Zefes shala oimet. The nozgam zefes udechaka yachir v'gozefes, and you manage to seal it on the zefes, not on the earthen part. The nimtza, what's the emes? That the zefes is oimet ben akisoy ben akarka chavius. It's still matzil. Chein b'chlei hamuriyas kelim that are used for fish brine. Why is he saying that? He's just explaining that there are certain kelim in which you smear the insides with something. It became like a zayd. Why is that, Yak? Same thing. If I have a keli and I smeared the insides, and now the outer part of the keli got peeled off, so the inner, you get it, the inner shmirach, it's like a crown. And now we have a few minutes, and with Hashem's help, we're going to learn the most amazing Pedic. For those of us that remember Chagiga, we learned this topic in Chagiga. I remember learning the Gemara. It was great. But we're going to be learning a big idea, a big rule. What exactly is saved in the Klei Cheres? What exactly is saved in the Tzomit Pasal? So, well, guys, until now we learned Medivrei Torah, everything, Oichlin, Mashkin, Kalim. The Chachamim made a big takana, and the Rambam will give the takana. It's a short Pedic, it's 4 halachas, but it's gavaldik. What is excluded? Medivrei Soifrim, and because of this interesting rabbinic halacha that only goes for some and not for all, we're going to have scenarios that you can have a keli, that the keli is tamei to mashiva, Medivrei Soifrim, and the contents in it, the liquid is completely tam, which normally doesn't work that way. Because of this unique derabanan, we're going to have very, very interesting bottom lines. Pedic Shleisha Asad has 4 halachas. It's a big Pedic. So, guys, I know that today, as yesterday, we were learning many pratidim, and we're learning a big idea now. So everyone should get a new type of chayas, a new type of brain should open up. Right? Not being that now we have to go back into the Mayach HaChoch. It's a big concept. Halach al. Kol hakelim hamatzilim etzamet pasal. However it was defined until now. So, like this midin Torah, okay, if it's a klei cheres, and if it was tightly sealed, the hakol kosher v'kayim, kayim v'yosher, matzilin al kol mashu v'toichayim. What is everything? Everything, guys. Bein oichlin, bein mashkin, bein begodim, klei shetef. Just to know, I know we never had that word. I think we didn't. Klei shetef means, just to know, any keli that even after it became tamei, it could become tahor through taking it to a mikvah called klei shetef. The word shetef means to rinse. It doesn't mean rinsing it in the sink with soap. What is not a klei shetef, klei cheres? It's not negir right directly. So everything in it midin Torah is nitzah. Aval aber medivrei soifrim. The din is sheklei cheres. Now, guys, klei cheres is dafka here. Sheklei cheres. I'm saying dafka because we learned today in Pedic Chof Aleph that the Chachamim made a kal v'chomer that if klei cheres is matzel v'tzamet pasel, all other kalim that are not makabel tuma, like a klei even, is for sure matzel. That's not this. This divrei seifrim is only on klei cheres. Klei cheres hamuk of tzamet pasel. Einoi matzel ella. Guys, remember this. Al ha'oichlin, ba'al ha'mashkin, and al klei cheres achedim shir b'toichlin. You know what's the common denominator between oichlin and mashkin and klei cheres? These are items that when they become tamei, they cannot be purified through a mikvah. This is the rabbinic one. Avol im hoivetoich klei cheres hamukov a klei shetef, a keli that's made from any material that could be toiveled in a mikvah or any begodim. Right? Unlike oichlin or mashkin, forget about the water, the exception. Then the Chachamim says they're b'chlal not protected. You know what that means? That means they become tamei b'tuma shiva. Hadei elu tameim. The Rambam wants to write over here why. The Rambam writes the why to explain to us why we're going to make many exceptions to this. Why? Like we just emphasized, right? That klei cheres, that the rabbinic halacha dani is only for the klei cheres. Pedic Chof Aleph, we said, what about a klei avonim? A klei avonim is matzel everything in it. Ain't mekabel tuma at all. They themselves are never mekabel tuma. Klei cheres is mekabel tuma. Another thing, klei tamei ain't a chaytzitz. B'chol klei amei haaretz b'cheskas tuma k'may she'izbar. In other words, my friends, if you have an Amaretz who doesn't know that his klei cheres is already tamei, doesn't know that. If your klei cheres is tamei, it's not matzel b'tzamet pasel. So if you are speaking about kelim that are made out of materials that are never going to become tamei, even the Amaretz is klei avonim, klei galalim, klei adama, klei dag oil. or dag are not tummy. Why would they make it a rabbinic? But since like I don't know who's speaking over here. I probably don't know which one it is on. I got it. I think I got it mute. Let me try that. That worked. Okay, I think that worked. So since the klicheres of Amoritz unbeknownst to the Amoritz might be Tameh, if it's Tameh, it's not Matzil. Oh, that's the problem. I pushed it. I forgot where I'm up to. Oh, now so why didn't the Chachamim say klicheres shel Amoritz lo yatzal al hakoil? That's a gewaldige kasha. Because Taka, if his keli is tamei, unbeknownst to him, then nothing in there, even kleicheres in there, even oichlin or mashkin, and avachaber is matzal alakol. No. Shadei Utar answers the Rambam. The pnei she'ein hamaoretz tamei be'ein atzma. The hamaoretz, that's the challenge. He doesn't acknowledge that from his lack of carefulness and knowledge, he doesn't know that. And Sho'omer, he says to himself, Hoyul, Klicheres Matzal Alakoil, Echad Ani ve'echad Esachavet. Lefika Chashu, or Hishru, V'gozru, Sholayatzil al Hakoil. So first of all, he thinks everything is good. So if you're going to tell the Hamaretz, by you it doesn't work, by someone else it works, he would not accept it. If you tell the Amoritz, by everyone, midrabanon, a klei cheres is not matzil on things that could be toiva, by anyone. Now hold on, how does that help? Well, what's going to happen if I have oichlin or mashkin that were in the klei cheres of the Amoritz? Guys, Chavedim never took oichlin or mashkin from the Amoritz. That's the beauty. They never took it. Oh, amru matzil alicholim ala mashkin klei cheres. Mipnei she'elu hashloisha take are always considered to meim al gav ha'aretz. Ben koidim shir b'ayil hameis, ben achashay v'yisham, tachas amid pasul, ulo oilam le'yishar achavim ha'aretz le'yich le'mashkon le'kleicheres. And by the way, don't think that a chaver is not allowed to eat food that's tummy. You could. If he borrows it, he's treating it like it's tummy. No michshol will come from that. El Hashem to me. Shadei elam tana lo'olam believe what they call. Aval Kleishetev, the Chavedim would borrow them from Amoritz. Now, Amoritz automatically has a status of Tumah. We consider him an Av, which means everything the Amoritz touches, just by it being touched by the Amoritz, will be a Rishon. What's the din of a Rishon? You only have to take it to the mikvah and wait until the night. Because every time a Chaver would borrow from Amoritz, Kalim that are able to be Tahard, they would taka say it's Tummy, but they would only think it's Tummy on a Rishon. They would take it to the mikvah. So to prevent that from happening, and maybe this Kleishetev was inside a Talmud Pasal, and the Amoritz was honest. It's not a shakran, but he doesn't know. He would tell the Chaver, no, this was there's no Tumas Meis. And really, because of the fact that if the Klicheres was already Tamei, it's not Matzal at all. But and the Chaver is going to go ahead and he's going to do what he always does. Because of Maga Amoritz, he's going to be Toivel, the Keli, and wait until the night. So it plays there across the board. Gozru Shalayatzel Klicheres on Kleishetev. Now again, Kleishetev doesn't only mean Kleishetev. It means on any item that is that is purable, toivable, you can take it to the mikvah, it's good. Same with Begad, halacha base. Now, let's go weiter. All them shroy nosim utecha chavis become someone puzzle. What would you argue, Danny? An Adam is also someone who can become taught. So if an Adam is inside a chavis, and he's inside a summit puzzle, so here the din will be that summit puzzle protects him. Question is why? We'll see, because it's not something common. But hold on, the Rambam is adding another big nuance. If you remember, going back 2 weeks ago, we learned about the goylo. The din of a goylo is that midrabanan, even though it's not affixed in the ground, it's like a kaven. If you touch the outside of it, even though it's closed, you become tummy. Unlike if I touch the outside of a house that's not sasum, I don't become tummy. So even if this barrel in which there is a person is a goyel, which means if I touch the outside of it, I become tummy to mashiva, still it's matzel the other minute. I feel go okay. And now why? So a person could become pure. The yero alish is there. Shall goes to play cheresh liyatz ala adam. The play should have sheino matzoi and chol have sheino matzoi loy goes rubai. Now that we established this rabbinic, we explained that the midrabanan a klei cheres of everyone is not matzel for those things that you could take to the mikvah. Now we're going to put together funny outcomes. But before we get to the funny outcomes, an exception to the takana, anything that's being used for afar para, and we're going to see that is susceptible even to the 5th level of tumah, and everyone knows that. Or anything that's being used for kachim, even the am haaretz are nemanim al taharasim because they are nezarim harbe. And now, final halacha dalet. You have this aperture between the bottom story and the top story. You know, it's people many times would go to the second story by putting as a ladder, and there would be like this sky roof window, an aperture. And you have tumah in the house. I mean, you have to go back and learn chaz of some beautiful chaz of oil. Let's halk up over here. So tumah is in the lower story. If the aperture is size of a tefach, what did we learn, my friends? If it's peseach tefach, the tumah goes through. Hold on. Ukedei on the suna al piho aruba, but the aruba is being closed. But with what? With the kedei means of cheres. Now, another detail. Unekuva bekoinis mashkem. So first of all, hakadeta tameya. Why is the kadeta tameya? Because the tumah goes in it. Once the tumah goes in it, it's tamei. 1 second. Okay. The aperture is not a tefach by a tefach. So first of all, even though it's not a tefach by a tefach, you would think it doesn't go there above. No. And even though klei cheres is not tamei migaboy from the outside of it, the crack, as we learned today, allows the tumah to go in it. If it's a kind of mashka. Now, but if the dish is intact, kol sheba aliyah me'ir cholenu mashkin klei cheres tor. So now, Taki, it does not allow the tumah to go through it. Guys, we're not speaking about the tumah going through a hole of a tefach by tefach. We're speaking about the fact that if the klei cheres midrabanan becomes tamei, as far as klei shetev is concerned, I think over here it has to be a tefach. Avol adam klei shetev really am tameim. She'en klei cheres choitzeitz ela alei cholon mashkon klei cheres. Chol sheba'aliyator ki'ilu hu tachas tzamid pasel b'klei cheres. And therefore, adam or kalim that can be taken to a mikvah midrabanan are not protected from that klei cheres, and they become tamei tumah shiva. And the Rambam says, don't say it's like an adam in a barrel. No. That's a common thing, that if there's an opening between this floor and that floor, people had kalim, and they would put the keli to close the opening. Lefika.
Could purify it. Yeah, Chateau, would that be considered pure?
I don't know. I don't remember. We learned this together in Gemara. I forgot. Now, lefika that are filled with mashkin. Hakeli tamei to mashiva, and the mashkin are tohoiden. I'm saying that's a crazy thing. Kidding? Tumah shiva means it's av. Mashkin are the most susceptible to tumah. Mashkin, we'll learn later, midrabanan, mashkin always go back to becoming a rishon. It's b'chlal tohoiden. So, guys, a reva. The point is that a pshuta kleitz is not susceptible to the gamitume. These troughs, these bowls, they have a clay kibble. So the woman and the reva are tameim, and the batzik is taught. Calls mantra sekas boy. Now here we're adding another nuance. When we say that the Chachamim said that the oichlin and the mashkin in the clay cheres, you go back to the din Torah, it's nitzoil. That's if they are in it the whole time. If you removed it and then they had contact. Now, once we say that clay cheres midrabanan becomes tamei, if an av touches food, the food becomes a rishon. But if persha, that means if she stopped. She removed her hands from the dough. So what does she, Danny? She becomes tummy to mashiva. If she now touches the dough, now she makes it tummy. How great is that? I know only midrabanan. If you move the liquid out of this container, you move the liquid out of this container. So we say the moment it left the liquid, the last second it's touching the container. It becomes nitmu b'maga kli or it becomes tummy when it goes into the new container. It's this interesting rabbanan that oichlin and mashkin are protected. It's protected because you apply the din of tzamid pasel. The moment you remove it from that keli, now if it touches another keli, the other keli, I know is only tamim midrabanan, but so what? But it's tamim midrabanan. So tumas af midrabanan is matam arishan midrabanan. Hoy piaro ba yishar kelaman tzamid pasel. She'em kamel kon shebiyano. Any of these kelim, right, that are matzah, not a klei cheres. What did we begin this chapter with? Only a klei cheres. You have the rabbinic law. You had a klei even, and that was the one that's filled up the aperture. We don't have this chashash. Which even midrabanan, like we learned in Allah Gimel, they did not make this takana. Then yeah, okay. If there's no drabanan, so then the tuma of the bottom floor does not go through at all. Hoya oil natui ba'aliyah umitzasai merudad al ha'aruba shebein bayis la'aliyah. So if you have a tent that was set up over there in the aliyah, and some of the edges of the tent go on the ground, go on the floor of the second story, but it drapes over this opening. So says the Rambam hareza matzah. It covers that hole. Even though the oil is not over the gag, oil matzil by just covering. Now let me just tell you to appreciate this halacha. We learned, I think it was in Perek Yud Ches. We learned yesterday, in the end in halacha Ches, that when you have an oil outside on the ground, remember those halachas? And there's a tumah under that covering, we don't consider that tumah to be under the oil. Forget there, we say that it's by kasva oila. Here we're not saying that. Here we are allowing any part of this oil, even the one that's already draping on the ground, to be a proper closure, and it's matzil. Yovaldik, to be continued.